My friend has agreed to let me write down some of her scary experiences, and I'm going to share some with you. This will most likely be a series, since all of my friends' weird encounters and paranormal activity couldn't fit in one post. Starting with the dreams, sleep paralysis, and sleepwalking. Later on we will delve into her experiences and her haunted house. I'm going to be doing a lot of different interviews, but over time I will get all the stories up here. Since she doesn't want me to use her real name on the internet, her pen name will be MK. I will also be changing some other minor details in order not to disclose any information. A lot of the descriptions in the story I direct quotes from her. Thank you. My friend MK has been a magnet for the abnormal her entire life. When she was little she would sleepwalk and have sleep paralysis, and was witnessing all sorts of absolutely horrible things. Now, I know that it's not uncommon for bad things to happen in stages of sleep paralysis and other things, but the evidence that has convinced both me and MK that this was something more unnatural, was the fact that she was so ridiculously young when they happened, and had not been introduced to any sort of gore or violence in her life. She lives in an extremely Catholic family that wouldn't introduce her to violence until she was about 13, at which point she promptly got addicted to zombie movies, and has absolutely no fear reflex. These first two dreams happened when she was anywhere from 2 to 4 years old, and both happened while she was living in a trailer park. The Burning Man. Through the entire experience, MK's eyes were open and she was physically moving through her trailer. She was laying on her bed at night when she says she smelled smoke. She got out of bed and went to open her door. Immediately she was engulfed in clouds of suffocating gray. She then walks down the hall and into the living room, and absolutely everything is on fire. The hallucinations were so vivid that she could physically hear the china in the cabinet cracking from the heat, and it was hard to breathe through the smoke. Out of nowhere in the middle of the room all of her muscles suddenly stiffened, and she was trapped in her own body. A man then walks out from the fire. His eyes are completely black and he is burning. She describes that he has a look of fear and anger and pain on his face. She could see his hair had burned from his scalp and saw ash falling from his head. His skin was bubbling and blistering as he turns to charcoal right in front of her eyes. He stood only about 5 feet away from MK. She says the man had a very distinct face, and says that even 20 years from now she will remember his face. The man's jaw falls from his skull, and hits the floor, melting. He begins to scream. It was an absolutely deafening sound, inhumanly loud, a scream of horror, anger and pain and fear. The screeching continued for what seemed like forever. Then MK felt like she was falling. She fell and then the man's screaming cut off, only to be replaced by her own. Her father's face appeared right in front of her. She has been screaming the entire time and had woken up her parents. After that experience they took her to her pediatrician, but he dismissed it as extreme sleepwalking or something like that. When she was older, her parents had told her that her pupils had expanded so much that there was no color left in her irises. She remembers every detail even to this day, and this was only the first of many encounters, paranormal and otherwise. Whispering heads. In this story, she was living in the same trailer park and was about a year older. MK was sleeping on her bed when she felt cold water drip onto her face and wake her up. It was icy cold and had gotten into her mouth. She sat up and saw all of the floor of her room was covered in a sparkling mist that would swirl around her feet when she walked. The door to her room was open and she walked out to the hallway which was covered in black mold. M.K's trailer seemed to be tilted, and down the hallway black water was congregating in the tilted corner. MK describes the scene as being cold and wet, with a weird feeling and things dripping from the ceiling. She finally looked up and saw hundreds of heads hanging from the roof that were entwined with wire. Their faces were frozen in agony and blood was dripping from your eyes, mouth, ears and everywhere else. The moment she peered upward, all of the head suddenly turned toward her and started babbling in languages she didn't recognize. She couldn't make sense of what was happening and was terrified as blood dripped on her face. The voices rose in volume until her ears rang, but then once again her house was leveled out and water-free. Her mother and father were with her again and were holding her shaking body, saying that a plane or helicopter had flown over and had made a loud noise. To this day she is somewhat unsettled by loud noises. Thank you for reading these first stories. In case any of you are worried, MK almost never sleepwalks anymore, nor does she have sleep paralysis. But things got worse before they get better. Not only with her own head but with encountering some spirits in the house that her family would later buy. Thank you for reading. My Friend the Psychopath. In 2011 I was 27 and living in Buenos Aires. I'd been in a nasty little breakup with an Argentine girl we'll call Marisol. I had also apparently got her pregnant. It's funny, 9 years later I can openly talk about it, but it's something my family nor my closest friends even knew about at the time. For the record, she miscarried when I returned to the US for throat surgery and my grandmother's funeral. I had developed a tumor that was later determined to be benign after getting the flu. I'm not ashamed to admit that at the time I felt so relieved. I knew that if she had the baby I would have to return to Buenos Aires to live permanently, because Marisol was like most Argentine women who were adamant about staying in their beloved Argentina. I also wasn't keen on a half-black and American baby growing up in Argentina. Anyway, at the time I had met some other really good friends in Buenos Aires that I still keep in touch with today. I think at the time I was under an extreme amount of pressure and needed people to talk to. I say this because I've always been an excellent judge of character. Somehow though I didn't see the sinister intentions of my new friend. Looking back on it now, the warning signs were everywhere. His name was Bill. Today I can't really remember how we met. I think it was at some expat function or a party. In any event, looking back on it now, Bill didn't even look all that friendly. He was a slightly overweight, average-looking, bald white guy with an awkward-shaped-looking head. He may not have looked friendly, but he exuded confidence, charisma and an overall feeling of just a friendly guy. We hit it off well and agreed to keep in touch. We started hanging out, going to the bars for drinks and to the clubs to party. It was like we became partners in crime. Nothing, and I mean nothing at the time, alerted me to his psychopathic tendencies. I should back up then. I've always had this odd fascination with serial killers and psychology. I've come to the conclusion that most people conflate the sociopath the psychopath, and even psychologists and law enforcement disagree on this. The way I've come to understand it is that in your lifetime you meet many sociopaths and you'll know it. Psychopaths, on the other hand, such as Ted Bundy and Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer, present themselves as normal people and are highly intelligent. So intelligent they are, they've learned how to appear normal in society, while simultaneously lacking empathy and emotional connections that a normal person would display. They're also able to compartmentalize their nefarious behavior, leading normal lives with partners and children, while stealing or beating, or even killing. Most psychopaths are not killers, but all serial killers exhibit signs of psychopathy. As I understand it, sociopaths are far easier to spot. They typically are not as cunning or intelligent and are unable to hide their lack of empathy or disregard for breaking the law or hurting others. In a word, they only care about themselves. I'm sure most of us here have encountered someone like that in their lives. Cold, callous and just not good people. All about them, and you know it. That's a sociopath. Again, most sociopaths don't kill people. So getting back to Bill. Bill was nice, charismatic, and a good friend, who just seemed to be stressed with his finance business in Argentina. The man was smart, very smart. One night we went out to a club. On our way there, Bill started rustling things around in his wallet and exclaimed, "F@CK, you think I can borrow 100 pesos from you?" At the time 100 pesos was equivalent to about US $20. "Sure man, of course," I replied. He said, "Don't worry, I'll pay you back." "Yeah, cool man. No problem." So that was that, and I gave Bill the money. We ended up having a good time as usual and went home after that. About a week went by and we had already met up a few times since we'd gone out to the club, and he still hadn't returned the money. At the time I wasn't in the best economical state and felt forced to ask for the money. "It's something I hate doing and something I don't do often." With a quizzical look on his face, Bill replied, "I gave it back to you already, remember?" I replied, "Number, you didn't." "Wait, did you?" "Yeah, of course, man." He was so good at lying. For a second or two I actually questioned myself. Maybe I had just forgotten. But the problem is when you're broke you remember anything related to money. I knew he hadn't returned it to me. We went back and forth for a minute until I said, "Hey, it's fine if you don't have, but you didn't give it back to me." Finally, when Bill realized I wasn't going to be swayed, he said, "No, Number, it's cool man. I was just pretty sure I gave the money back to you. If you said I didn't, then I didn't. I just could have swore that you did." I wasn't even mad at him. I just figured the man was going through hard times. Money can do weird things to people, I figured. He ended up giving me back the money and I just shrugged the whole thing off. Nothing out of the ordinary happened to us after that until one day a few months later Bill called me. I had returned to LA for emergency surgery on my throat and my grandma's death. "Hey Jackson, it's Bill. How are things?" We exchanged the usual pleasantries until he explained the reason for his call. "Listen, I have a business proposition for you." "So I have this, insert vague idea here, and all I would need is your id. With just your id you would be making $500 per month." Now at the time I was young, jobless and had temporarily moved back in my parents'. I know most of you out there are saying how could I be so stupid, but you must understand Bill was my friend. I trusted him. He had paid me back the money in the end that he believed he didn't owe me. I had no reason to suspect it was a scheme. I ask myself how I could have been taken. But that's just how psychopathic this guy was. Think Ted Bundy charismatic. Anyway, the weeks went by, then months. I would email Bill about the business and my money. At first I would get short responses, until finally I got none. Finally, that's when I started feeling weird about things. The bell started ringing. And then one day another friend of mine emailed me a link to an FBI bulletin. It turned out my friend Bill was an international fugitive. He was on the run from U.S. authorities for fraud and had fled to Argentina. As if not to make matters worse, this man created a customer service sham business and defrauded dozens of people in the process, including me. I never talked to Bill again. But it's the first and only time in my life that I've met someone as cunning, calculated and cold as William Buckley. I still have some of the emails he sent me when we were friends. It's really unbelievable. Then again, wait for the other story out of Argentina of my other friend who ended up threatening my life and whose father had connections to the Ukrainian mafia. Now that I think about it, I was a f***ing horrible judge of character in Argentina. Below you'll find links to an article regarding William Buckley and the expats forum that discusses all his dirty deeds. So there you have it. My first, and hopefully only friendship, with a true psychopath. Be wary of your friends, folks. ETA, Bill didn't have to steal. He didn't come from a poor family. In fact, he often talked about the inheritance he received from his late grandmother, though he admitted he had run through it. He also went to business school and grew up upper middle class. This is why I say Bill was a psychopath. He defrauded people either because he liked it or because of a compulsion. He never had to. His father owned a car dealership, if I'm not mistaken. My friend tried to kill me. I made friends with a stranger from the internet. Every time we hung out, something bad happened. Being robbed, almost assaulted, a shooting right outside the restaurant we ate at, and more. We stopped going out, and started hanging out at home. I began taking anxiety medication at this point, and kept it a secret. My internet friend has known me 2 years now. We're hanging out at my place, and they ask to be alone for a few minutes to make a call. They go into my room, because it's storming outside. They were in for a minute, so I had to check on them. They come out and ask if I have any alcohol, and they pour me a generous shot of tequila. It was strange. It was a whole cup. But I'm quite the drinker, and they poured themselves one too. That evening when they go home, I take my prescribed medication and nearly have a heart attack and blackout. Apparently I went to the hospital and everything. When I was released, I came home and took my medication again. Same thing happens and I start shaking and convulsing. At this point I find crushed up pills behind my dresser and notice my medication is covered in a thick white dust, and the same dust is on the medical marijuana I have. It's crushed up Xanax. They found my medication when they were in my room. I drank a half a gallon of milk and so much water. I blacked out again and don't remember much. Over the next few days I find out I've been hanging out with my friend with benefits significant other, and they tampered with my meds and poured me the drink that evening to kill me. The whole time we've been friends, they've been gathering information about the person they're being cheated on with me. I had no idea. The combined sedation from these two addictive substances can lead to life-threatening respiratory depression and coma. I had to flush all of my medicine and pay for refills. My psychiatrist luckily believed me. After seeing me for some time now, I'm on the road to recovery, with new traumas. My friend tried to kill me and make it look like a drug overdose. I've changed some things to remain anonymous. My God-honest confession of over a decade of living in a haunted family home and seeing what I find out to be called the Hat Man. About 12 years old I begin waking up on multiple occasions to my dad shaking me, asking me very seriously if I was up right then and walking around. Of course I say no and become concerned. Alongside that, my house is very strange. We moved there when I was 4. It was built in the 70s and in Southern California Inland Empire. We live in a cul-de-sac where the house is on an acre surrounded by trees on a hillside. Very creepy outside at night and in the house. So my dad's experiencing something I don't know about yet. All the while my parents are going through a divorce. My dad moves out. I'm left with my mom and older sister. It's hard to recall when things got weird cause strange and scary stuff always happened, but I noticed when I had a new friend stay the night at around 13 seconds old and he up and left in the morning and didn't wake me. Come to find out he was being tormented by something standing in my doorway watching him as we slept in my room, and he described the person to have a cloak and large hat and described them as one of those shadow people. Never heard of at the time. He had asked me, someone was at your door watching us sleep that night. Did you know or see them? Was it your family? He was very creeped out and was kinda hard for me to take him serious with what he was saying. So that was weird. All the while I'm the new man of the house. My mom worked 2 jobs and I was homeschooled at this time, so I had till late afternoon to myself, and even when my mom was home I had free reign. Little things start happening, like I'm in the living room and I hear cabinets and stuff opening in the kitchen. Once I go in the kitchen I hear my dog barking in the living room where I just was, and this planter was knocked over. Dirt scattered. Couldn't explain it. More things like that happened. Definitely I started to be aware of a presence. So fast forward, I sleep at the end of a hall that's dark. I begin occasionally waking up to my door that was closed always open and slight light pouring in, and once I look I see a rather short silhouette and head peeking into my room around the corner of the threshold, and I'm paralyzed with fear. I get up and pull my light string above my bed as fast as I can, and my door is back shut. I'm sure I thought it was a dream. This happens about 5 more times, and all the while I'm telling my mom about it and she never experienced a thing. Doesn't really believe me and doesn't pay much mind other than telling me I'm having bad dreams. Neither my sister too. She hasn't experienced a thing. Then another time I wake up and see light pouring in through the cracks and underneath the door, and I have sleep paralysis, but I can see my door is shut still, so no entity looking at me, except I see a black cloud misty type of thing seeping through the top crack of my door and collecting, building and accumulating in the corner of the ceiling. Mind you, it's dark as F despite the foggy light behind the door in my room already, and this thing's so black that you can see it in pitch black corners. I absolutely freak once I can move and run into my mom's room. I am about 14 and was so scared I had to sleep with her. We buy sage and bless the house and say a few prayers at that time after, and things calm down for a while. Meanwhile, my sister is in a church which I'm not into, nor is my mom. Someone from her church without any prior knowledge tells her that a demon is tormenting her brother. This girl didn't even know she had a sibling. Years later, I'm off to live with my dad at 17. We get to talking and he explains about those times he woke me up in a panic and said that he kept seeing the shadow person that I was seeing. He described waking up to an open door and light pouring in with a short person blacker than black facing him and walking back and forth near the doorway, and him being very frightened each time he'd get up and try and find whoever was in the house and usually wake me up to see if it was me. I remember these times being woken up by my dad in a panic, him asking me, "Were you just up right now?" He said that one time he had been trying to tell my mom what he had been seeing and she kinda just ignores him and says he's crazy or he's having a dream. He wakes up one time and sees the shadow person at the door in the hallway. Paralyzed with fear, he manages to wake my mom up by nudging her with his hand, and he whispered, "Look, it's there," and my dog is growling on the edge of the bed. I've gotten stories from both sides, my mom and dad, of this incident, and they match up. He's seeing someone stand there with the door open but only sees a shadow, and my dog probably does too. My mom's telling him, "I don't see anything, there's nothing there." She just sees the door shut and nothing but darkness, no feeling or nothing, but remembers the dog growling at the door. My dad jumps up quick, turns the light on, and there's nothing. Door is shut. I guess he called a demonologist and explained what was happening after a while, and the guy had a name for it and everything, but told my dad, "You don't see a large tall man at the foot of your bed with a cloak and or large hat, about 7 feet tall?" Sometimes my dad says no, only the short one outside the room, and he says, "Well, what you're describing is usually one of a pair of demons, and there's usually a tall man with a strange hat," and has my dad absolutely shook. So the next couple nights, at some point it happens again, sees the small guy in the hallway, and he takes a second look to his left and sees what he described as a 7-foot-tall black abyss of a man standing at the foot of his bed, and he's wearing a very abnormally tall top hat and has a cloak on or a trench coat, just standing there. I'm not exactly sure what happened after that. He told me this story some years ago, but that shook me to my core hearing that, cause obviously those times where I was experiencing things in the night, if I had taken a second look I might have saw him too, instead of just the short one in the doorway, and it was sort of what my friend had described when I was a kid and he stayed the night. Fast forward, so I move in with a GF at 19. Haven't been to my mom's in a while. She gets pregnant, we get a small apartment, and things are okay for the most part. After years of reminiscing about this shadow person, my son is 3 now. I have a 1-bedroom in downtown, and I pulled the mattress in the living room for movie night in the living room, and we fell asleep in there. My GF left for her job at 1 a.m. I believe, and I am with my son in the living room, and about 10 feet in front of the foot of my bed to the left is the doorway to my bedroom. I wake up around 3 a.m. regularly at this point also, and always creeps me out. This time I wake up and I see light pouring in from my bedroom and a short shadow and or person looking at me from around the corner of the door threshold in my bedroom. I'm instantly shocked with fear, but I manage to sit up and I'm rubbing my eyes, looking back at it over and over and wondering why it's not going away. When I rub my eyes thinking this can't be happening, no way am I seeing this, then my son sits up with tired eyes and says, "Dad, make go away," while pointing in that direction. Baby talk, but he meant to say Dad, make him go away obviously. I'm absolutely shook to my core that I'm seeing this, not believing my eyes. Then my child confirms it, that yup, I'm seeing this fucking thing again. As soon as respond though and comfort my child, it's gone. I tell my GF and she's scared as well and knows of the history of my paranormal encounters and everything, but things move forward. We let the lease run out on that apartment last year and weren't ready to move, so we move with the in-laws. We don't get along well and never did, so I move with my mom and come back to work near my family home, while my GF stays at her parents' with the kid for their help. Moved back in my mom's 3 months ago. I'm 24 now, haven't been here in 7 years almost, and as soon as I'm back I'm getting into listening to scary stories on YouTube, and I'm hearing stories of shadow people, the Hatman, the old hag. This story is the only reason I've made a Reddit account, just to share my experience. So I'm here alone a lot again. It started with one night I came home, it was only me and I am in my room with my door shut. I hear noises as if someone's home, but I know there is not. Noises like fridge opening and slamming shut rather hard, my creaky old cabinets opening and shutting, the microwave, etc. etc. So I get up expecting someone in the kitchen and nothing. This is about 2 a.m. I go back to bed and hear it again, and now I'm shook. I'm frozen in fear as I was as a teen when things happened. I hear footsteps all through the house. It sounds like someone's walking from one end of the house down to my room and back. Distinct person footstep sounds back and forth rather fast too, like someone rushing around to leave for work or something. I'm looking out my window at the driveway, expecting to see my mom's husband's car, like maybe it's him, but no, nothing. I'm scared as fuck. I lay back down despite the noise and I'm being quiet. Whatever it is, I don't want it to know I'm here. I hear this thing walk straight up to my door, as I hope it doesn't. In my head it was like it knew. I hear it rest some weight against my door, like as if someone put their hand on the knob and pressed a air against the door. It's unlocked. I'm frozen in fear and hoping to God the door don't open, and I swear I telepathically could sense this thing was contemplating coming in and decided not to and walked away. This was more frightening than the time the black smoke poured in the door, more frightening than when my child saw it too. So next few nights, it's a weekend, my mom and her husband are gone each night and I'm a night owl. I'm up usually unless I got work in the AM. I am hearing things regularly just like what I described. But with my bad relationship with my mom, I didn't wanna immediately move back in and then start telling her the house is haunted and have her think I'm on drugs. Even though knowing what happened when I was a young teen, I finally days later, very subtle, I bring up that I was hearing stuff in the house and in the living room, and did they happen to as well recently, and I had said, is there a ghost or something, has this happened since I left? And she says absolutely not, never, and makes a joke about that it may be something following me. No more than a night or two later I fall asleep with no recollection. Usually I have to turn my TV or phone off to go to sleep once I'm tired, so I know generally the time I fell asleep. Even this time I remember laying down, on Instagram on my phone, wasting time. Don't remember being tired. Next thing I can remember is the following. I'm dreaming but not aware of it, so I'm terrified. I'm bound with hands behind my back and I'm in pain, and I'm in a purgatory sort of environment with this large hatted tall dense black of a shadow in the figure of a man standing in front of me, and he's explaining to me for the better part that he's a demon, exact words I can't recall well, and telling me other things of that sort, and he has a bloody fleshy decapitated head in his hand that is a demon head and has horns and fangs, and he makes me take a bite out of it and eat the flesh as I'm in agony. By that time my subconscious says this is ridiculous and it's a dream, so I wake up, but once I wake up my blinds to my window swinging around making a fuck ton of noise, and they are right next to my I sleep under the window alongside the wall. And I know for a fact my window is shut, my door is shut, there is no draft whatsoever. I get up immediately and am trying to process the dream I was having and why it sounded like someone jumped through my window with the blinds shut and the window shut. I am up now trying to recreate it, and I open my window even and my door and the window in the room of which my door is in, and try to create a draft as such to make my blinds move all crazy and make noise. Not even with my window open could I get them to move, and when I say moving they were making so much noise and swinging around like I said as if something had went crashing into them without breaking my window. I know for a fact my window was shut. I just can't explain why they moved. I don't have a ceiling fan nor any other fan. It gets pretty stagnant as far as air. There's no draft where I'm at in the house and I just can't explain it, not to mention the dream I'm having before that. That brings you up to speed to present day. That was about 3 weeks ago. Leave a comment, please. Let me know what you think or if you have any questions. Thanks. One of my mom's neighbors is a psychopath. This happened in October 2019. I just came across the photos on my phone, but I'd if I should upload them. So it was a weekend and I figured it would be a good idea to go out of town for the day and introduce my girlfriend to my mom for the first time. She lives out on the plains on 40 acres. The house and land are 1/4 mile off the road into the field, with our long driveway dividing the land of 2 neighbors. We arrived around noon and my brother and his wife also happened to be out there visiting that day, so I introduced the GF to everyone and all the dogs. I noticed that the loudest and most obnoxious dog, the beagle, didn't come greet us, and my mom explained that the previous night she went to grab something from the truck and on her way in the dog had darted out the door and ran off into the field and he still hasn't come back. This isn't all that uncommon for a dog to run off in the night and come back a couple days later. Later that day my mom recalls that her and my nieces were woke up around 1 a.m. to all the dogs howling and barking non-stop, just going nuts. Eventually they stop and everyone goes back to sleep. We continue to have a nice quiet day out in the middle of nowhere for a few more hours when we notice that this hawk has been flying around the same spot all day in the field, so my brother and his wife go to check it out while I fuck around doing something else. A few minutes later my brother comes back and tells me he found the missing beagle, but something is wrong. I should go check it out before telling my mom. I follow my brother into the field expecting to find a dead dog. As we're walking I see a spot of blood and think that it was probably coyotes. He shows me a trail of blood that leads to a larger puddle and another trail. The dog seems to have been dragged around some. That trail lead to an area in the field where the dog lay. As soon as I saw the dog, something looked wrong about the scene. All the plants around him were trampled and something looked different about him. I took a few more steps and realized that he is missing skin. This wasn't just a few bits missing from a fight or birds picking at him though. The only skin left on him was his head, tail, and paws. With very distinguished straight lines. He had been skinned. Some sick motherfucker had killed, skinned, and taken the pelt of our dog in the middle of the night, only a couple 100 feet from the front door. Of course we called the cops. They took 2 hours to arrive, and took pictures. We looked around the area and noticed tire tracks, but we couldn't tell how old they were. We also found a pile of horse shit that looked pretty fresh close by. Did whoever did this ride a horse out there? To this day the cops have never followed up with anything and nothing else has happened yet. Nature cams were installed and fences have been mended so dogs can't get out, but we still have no idea who did it. I came across the pictures on my phone today and can't seem to bring myself to delete them. Horrifying quarantine experience. I was upstairs in my room one night playing video games with the volume really loud when I thought I heard noises coming from downstairs. I muted the TV and listened closer. Nothing. I resumed playing the game for another hour when I heard it again, only louder. I was sure I heard it this time and was a little freaked out. To assure myself I went downstairs to the basement where I thought I heard the noise coming from. As soon as I opened the basement door, I was hit with a cold breeze. I went downstairs and saw the window wide open. I was 100% sure I had closed and locked all the windows in the house. I was ready to make a run for it when something stopped me. I turned around and for the first time noticed the closet door was slightly cracked open. I stood for what seemed like 30 minutes in front of that door debating whether I should open it. I moved closer and put my hand on the doorknob. All of a sudden I heard a creepy crackle coming from inside the closet. I have never run faster up a flight of stairs before. I locked the door and called the cops, who had an unusually fast response time. They came in and searched the house, and not even 5 minutes into their search I heard a gunshot from downstairs. A few minutes later they came out with a deranged-looking man, probably homeless. They put him in the back of the car and told me they had opened the door and the man was holding a gun, shot at them and missed. He luckily missed and the cops disarmed him and arrested him. The scariest part was how close I was to opening that door and likely being murdered. Skinless Tom encounter. I live in a rural area in East Tennessee called Hampton. It's a small town, everyone knows everyone, the kind of place you'd think of when you think of a mountainous rural area. When this took place I was about 16 or 17, now 27. And I was hanging out with my cousin Jay. For anonymity, he personally requested I leave his name out. We were home alone as our dads went out for a night of drinking in a more suburban town about 20 or so minutes away named Johnson City, so naturally we did what 16-year-olds do. We got pretty blazed and went for a car ride. Now my car's nothing impressive, a 2004 Dodge Jeep. I'd recently gotten the car painted to a dark black as the paint on the car was honestly just plain ugly. I promise this has relevance later. The roads were completely empty and we had been driving for about 10 or so minutes, and in either utter stupidity or because I was so stoned, it's a high possibility of either, I'd left my headlights off. There were street lights along the road we were traveling down for increased visibility for drivers at night. And that's when me and my cousin reached a little dip in the road. For reference, we were going up a somewhat steep mountain with heavy woods, and just under the dip is just a drop and there's a guardrail to prevent drivers from going over the mountaintop. Suddenly my cousin gasps and beckons my attention to the side. Of the road. Naturally I slowed down and squinted my eyes to see the figure of a man. At this point my headlights were still flicked off. As we were coming towards the guardrail I could sense something was just off, like there was electricity in the air. It's something I still can't explain to this day, so I flicked my headlights on, and standing just behind the guardrail was a man. He was about 6'2", maybe 6'3", but one thing was off about him. He was completely skinless. You could see every detail of the man's exposed muscle and bone. As soon as I flicked my headlights on to see this horrid thing, he jumped back a little, seemingly surprised by my headlights, and for a split second the two of us met eyes, and before I could even blink he was over the edge. He had seemingly jumped. I was fairly freaked out, to say the least, so I sped off, not giving any care to the neighbors I may have woken from my speeding car. We soon made it home and booked it inside. Still in utter disbelief we called the police. As we talked to the operator and told them our situation, she took a fairly rude tone, asking if this was some kind of sick Skinless Tom joke, and told us that these calls held up other potentially attention-requiring matters, and abruptly hung up. After the call me and my cousin were somewhat pissed, but one thing the operator said caught my attention. Skinless Tom. Apparently a man named Tom and a woman were going out for dinner and a stroll in the park. Whilst in the park the woman's husband emerged from the dense woods in front of the two. Tom, realizing what was happening, started to tell the man he had no idea she was with anyone. Sadly this didn't reach the man. The man started to beat Tom and had brought a hunting knife with him. He started to skin Tom. When the woman reported this, the husband was arrested and confessed to the whole thing. What's intriguing about this case is that Tom was never found, but the skin from his body was found at the crime scene, creating the legendary in my area of Tennessee folklore tale of Skinless Tom. People have reported seeing him around this area for about 4 years now. I'm almost certain what I saw that day was Skinless Tom. My cousin says he had an even more horrifying memory. He recounts that when the man turned and looked back at us before jumping, that the thing had an insane smile on its face, a massive hunting knife in its left hand. Now if it were just me that had saw it, I would have just thought I was too stoned and simply had imagined it all, but my cousin was there to solidify everything from this story. I may add a picture of the guardrail for reference soon. Smell of death. story of a disturbing cleanup that I had to take care of as a car detailer. I worked as a car detailer at a dealership for a few years. The boss had a small truck towed in one day and asked myself and another detailer to see if we could clean it out. We had taken care of some bad smelling and filthy vehicles before, so we figured this was the same kind of deal. We were wrong. Before even opening the truck, we smelled it. Nasty, rotten, thick air surrounded the truck. I asked my co-worker if he ever smelled anything like it. He shook his head. I walked over and opened the door. The smell of something dead rushed out. It was overwhelmingly sickening. I went and talked to the boss about the unbearable smell. He was trying to get some money out of it. The guy who bought it died not very long after purchasing the truck, so if possible he wanted to get it back to selling condition. He said he wanted the seats gutted because he bought all new seating. I still informed him cleaning it was nearly impossible. The smell was making everyone sick. I pretty much said that I needed some type of breathing apparatus for myself and anyone brave enough to help me try to clean the vehicle out, so he bought us painting jumpsuits and full face masks. It did help a bit. If we didn't have those items, it would not have been possible. The guy I worked with was a veteran detailer. He had many years of cleaning up and detail cleaning vehicles. He told me he had never had a case like that truck. We began to take the car apart and bagged the old seats in plastic bags. We shampooed the carpets and washed out the engine. We scrubbed and conditioned the vinyl of the dash and interior. It was looking way better. We attached the new seats and looked for anything else we could clean up to get the lingering smell out. My co-worker sat in the driver's seat and contemplated buying the little truck, but we both forgot a major place to clean up. He reached down and turned on the AC full blast. A bunch of burnt little brown and black things flew out at him, all over his face and chest. These things hit him. The smell was there again. We tried everything we could, but whatever happened in that truck wasn't able to be washed off. We got close, but when it would sit in the sun for any amount of time, the smell would be back. We later found out what happened. Apparently a guy died in the truck. They didn't find him for a while. By the time they found him, he was swollen and split and was covered in maggots and flies. I guess since the weather was hot, it sped up the process of decomposition. Those things that flew out of the AC were burnt and cooked maggots. An officer came by and filled us in. My co-worker vomited. The smell of death is strong. It's very hard to get rid of if you can at all. No matter how hard we cleaned, I'm sure there would be some kind of residue somewhere. But maybe the truck was never to be sold again. Maybe it's just a smell that is not possible to remove. But it was a horrible experience, but I'm sure the officer had it much, much worse. Strangest night as a security guard. I used to have a part-time job as a security guard at a senior home, not assisted living, so there weren't any nurses or such on the premises, just me and 5,100 old people. My shift was weekends 6 p.m. 6 a.m., though nothing really happened until 10 p.m. when all the visitors left and the residents were asleep. I walked around checking windows and doors, making sure they were locked. The cafeteria has a door to the back garden. I made sure to lock it too. After finishing my rounds, it's 4 stories high, I get back to my desk, and I see movement in the garden. It's windy, so I assumed it was just trees and bushes blowing around, but I keep a close eye on it. That's when I see the shape of a person in a white dress dancing in the garden. I race to the cafeteria and see nothing. After checking the door, it's still locked. I go back to my desk and watch the feed. She comes back, whirling around, and it makes me feel cold. I grab my phone and go check one more time. Still nothing. But this time, the door is unlocked. I relock it, head back to my desk and look through the cameras. Nobody is in the building, but I walk around just in case. After confirming nobody is inside, I sit back down and calm down, assuming I mistakenly unlock the door. Then, I see a shadowy figure standing in front of the main entrance doors. I look at the front camera, nothing there. I look back to the door and the shadow is standing right there. That's when things got really weird. The shadow smiled, disappeared, then the doors opened. To open those doors, you need a security card. or a resident opens it from the inside. Nobody was there to buzz them in. My desk is in front of the doors, and nobody was outside to use a card, but the door is wide open. I brace myself to deal with whatever tries to enter through the second set of doors. Those are just motion sensor. Nothing comes. The outside doors close and the inside doors remain shut. After the doors shut, I saw a flash of light in the garden camera, but then nothing. I decide to call maintenance and tell them about the faulty door, and walk outside to investigate, going around the whole building just in case I find a kid messing with me. That's when I see the giant steel double doors where the dumpsters are stored. They're bent outward. A vehicle hitting the doors would push them inward, but the doors look like they were rammed from the inside. When I mentioned that to maintenance, they were shocked. The doors were fine when my shift started and I didn't hear any noise. I quit a week later. The Old Nun and the Man Upstairs. This is about a decade ago, and it still scares me. Doctor at the bottom. My great-aunt lived alone in a small, two-floor cape house one town over that my grandfather had built her in the 1940s. She had a tiny spare bedroom and writing office upstairs. My great-aunt was a nun and teacher, and would often write friends, former students, and work on a book of her stories she never quite finished. My mother and I would visit from time to time to help take care of chores in and around the house. As years went on, when I left for college, my mother started visiting more often. No sense in us both being alone, she told me. While I was away, my great-aunt started showing signs of dementia that progressed steadily. It started with stories she'd tell us for the 1000th time, so we already knew them well. One story would start when she and my grandfather were kids, but then resolve somehow when she was an adult. Basically, she'd combine two unrelated stories into one, which would leave her confused. She also started forgetting to eat, take her meds, and would crank the heat in summer to the point where she'd be dehydrated. Some days were worse than others, so when I finished college, we started visiting nearly daily as she absolutely refused going to an assisted living home. We set up Meals on Wheels and asked some of her friends and former neighbors to come by, so we weren't the only ones visiting. My mother and I convinced her to start writing in the kitchen, rather than upstairs, to prevent a fall on the steps. Without a reason to go upstairs, we shut off the old second-floor heaters and closed the overpainted, squeaky door to the stairs. We'd find the door cracked open every so often, but my great-aunt insisted she didn't go up anymore. We weren't the only ones stopping by, so maybe someone fetched something upstairs and forgot to close it. Again, my great-aunt was a nun, and around the holidays, she'd roll out the more religious stories and talk about God a lot. One day when I was visiting her alone, she started reflecting on her life, mortality, and when the man upstairs was going to come for her. I changed the subject, as it's uncomfortable, but, over time, she started talking more about when she'd die. He is going to come for me soon. I don't know when the man upstairs will do it though. Trying to reassure her, Auntie, I'm sure you have many years left. God isn't coming to take you anytime soon. With the most serious expression I've ever seen on her sweet old face, she said, no, not God, the man upstairs. As around this point in time, she started seeing things, like flashes or spiders that weren't there, and a little boy in her living room that only she could see, even when my mom or I were visiting. I chalked this up to the dementia. Later that week, snow fell, so after shoveling myself out early, I went to my great-aunt's to shovel her walkway for my mom who'd visit later. After shoveling, I called her from my warm car so she'd know it was taken care of. I also said I wasn't coming in as I had to go to work, and she thanked me. I drove off and noticed I had forgotten my rock salt I had used on the walkway, so quickly circled the block and picked it up. As I was reaching for it, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. The second-floor light in the old writing office had turned on. I glanced quickly, then pretended I didn't see it. I got in my car, and went down the road a short way, confirming in my mirrors it was on. I called my mom. "Can you call Auntie and see if she has company over? Don't say I asked, and let me know how long it takes her to pick up." My mom called back almost immediately. "No, she doesn't have company over. Not this early," and she picked up right away. "Mom, you need to call the police." The light upstairs turned on after I talked to her. There's no way a 95-year-old lady hung up, hustled upstairs, then back down to pick up your call. There was no phone hooked up on the second floor. As my mom called the police, I called my aunt. "Hi Auntie, I almost forgot. You have a doctor's appointment today. I'll come pick you up. We can grab a hot chocolate before we head over." I parked my car in front of the house and acted as normally as I could. It felt like an eternity helping her get her housecoat on and out the door. As I turned the lock, I heard footsteps above us in the second-floor room where I saw the light turn on. I helped her into my car, never looking at the house, too scared for what I'd see in the window. We went down the road a bit and I called my mom. She was already on her way over and said the police would be by shortly. I told her where I parked. She arrived there and the police weren't far behind her. I flagged down the cop before he got closer and told him what I saw and heard. He radioed for 2 more cars. My mom stayed with our great-aunt to keep her calm as police surrounded her house. I gave them the keys to the doors and 2 went in as the 3rd cop and I stayed outside. After a few tense minutes, the 2 officers returned with a disheveled, gaunt man in handcuffs. "Oh, the man upstairs," my aunt said to my mother on looking as they fought the crazed man into the back of one of the cruisers. My great-aunt had apparently let the disturbed, homeless man in, thinking he was Meals on Wheels and he had been secretly living upstairs as my great-aunt was confused if he was even real. When we were allowed back in, we saw that the upstairs was a mess. Garbage, rotting food stolen from the kitchen. The amount of filth was scary. The creepiest things were the notes, written many, maybe hundreds of times, in different inks and pencil scrawlings around the writing office window that overlooked her walkway was "Go away. Don't stay. I'll come down the back of the door to the stairs" had notes too. "She can see me but you don't. And I can see you." It was clear he had probably wrote notes each time someone visited over weeks and possibly months. My great-aunt was temporarily shocked, but it was quickly forgotten given her condition, and would ask about the man upstairs less and less. The homeless man, who was in poor physical and mental health himself, was hospitalized and passed after a few weeks later into the winter. He had escaped the hospital, but his body was found the day after. He died having succumbed to the cold and exposure. My mom and I told Auntie a couple weeks later when we found out. "Oh, I know. He told me last night. He's upstairs again but you can't see him now." At just that instant, my mom and I heard the door to the stairs squeak open. TLDR, a homeless man was living in my elderly great-aunt's house. We thought it was her dementia. The reason I stopped working at the airport. I started my new job at Will Rogers Airport. I say new job but I was really just moved to a different airline and working in the same ramp agent position. Now, I have to tell you that I have a crippling fear of heights and my least favorite part of being a ramp agent is when I have to climb in the cargo bin on a rear-loading plane because it's about 20 feet above the ground. This particular night was a strange mix of a few factors creating an uneasy feeling. The first ambient setting condition is it was raining. Not just light raining but pouring rain with a few scattered lightning flashes and random power surges. Every now and then we have dead bodies transported in the cargo bins. This was one of those occasions and tonight was my lucky night apparently because my manager told me I was throwing this plane. Throwing meaning I was pulling the cargo out of the bin. It was the last plane for the night and wasn't very much cargo beside the body. My coworker John pulled the ramp loader to the plane and raised it up so I can walk up the conveyor belt to enter the bin. About 4 other coworkers come over with a baggage tug for the cargo. I say to everyone in a louder than normal tone because the rain was loudly smacking the metal shell of the airplane. "I hope y'all are ready. I'm not trying to be in there all night." John laughed and said, "Don't worry about it, maybe you can make a new friend in there in reference to the body. I didn't think it was funny, but I chuckled and told him to shut up and let's get going. I climbed into the small and cramped space and sat in the bin as far from this human-sized white cardboard box as I could and pulled my phone out of my pocket to select a playlist to listen to while I throw the bin. I find a good one and I start working. The conveyor belt moves at a snail's pace and you have to wait until they scan each individual package, so I can't just throw them as fast as I want to get out of there. About 10 minutes into it, I'm getting closer and closer to this box and my music stops playing. I've had earbuds that short out when they get wet, so in the front of my mind I automatically assume the train somehow got on and I just needed to shake a little water out of them, but they were bone dry. I check Spotify to see if it was a glitch or problem with the app and I see I have an unread text. Did I get a notification and forgot in the midst of my rap-fueled baggage handling? The way my phone is set up, when I get a message it will tell you who it is from, but it won't display the message. You have to access them to read it. The message was from an unknown number, which was odd because very few people have my number to begin with. I click the notification to read the message and all it said was hi. I send a text back saying, "Hey, who is this?" My phone displayed that whoever sent the message saw mine immediately after it sent. I waited and no response. I started my playlist back up and got back to my job. Shortly after, a crash of thunder that was so loud the plane shook made me jump at first, but I quickly rationalized it and returned to work. I noticed the conveyor belt was no longer moving. I yelled to John, "What the hell is going on out there? Why did it stop?" John replied, "Damn thing ran out of gas. We're going to take this load of cargo to drop off while we get another loader over here. Sit tight." I think to myself, where TF else am I going to go? About 1 minute later it got cold, like I could see my breath cold. I wrote it off as just a cold front and reach over for some stranger's luggage to lean on while I wait. As I look over for a bag to grab, lighting went across the sky and I saw a quick flash of a little boy 11 maybe 12 years old sitting on the white box, staring at me with this eerily happy smile and his head turned slightly to the side. My heart sunk and I froze, never taking my eyes off that box for what felt like hours. I was startled by the replacement conveyor belt starting up right next to the plane. I darted to the moving conveyor, crawling as fast as I could, trying to keep my balance and panic at the same time. I hit the ground and looked at John and said, "Nope, I'm done. You're going to have to go in there." I didn't want to explain exactly what I saw, but John knew something scared me shitless. He asked me what's wrong. "Who is it?" I stuttered and walked away before I could say anything. Then I got a new text message notification that I heard loud and clear this time, a response from the unknown sender saying, "It's your new friend."